OnePlus, step aside because we got a new flagship killer in town, President Donald Trump. So remember that USA just banned Huawei from using Google services on any of their new phones? Huge deal, right? Well, the United States of America just punched Huawei in the gut with another sanction, and honestly, this definitely could be the knockout punch. And starting from today, Huawei has 12 months to salvage the situation before it becomes irreversible. Before we talk about the new gut punch from America, I'll quickly lay out the situation with Google services and we'll move on from there. So the trade war between America and China has obviously escalated severely, with Huawei being one of the focal points of America's attack. Prime example, Huawei is now banned from using Google services ever again on their new cell phones just this past May of 2020. This is obviously a massive blow to Huawei because there are a ton of people who will not use a phone without Google services, and considering that 85% of smartphones in the world run on Android, that's a whopping 3 billion people with an Android phone. That's almost half the world. However, having an Android smartphone doesn't necessarily mean you get Google services. For example, since Google is banned in China, basically every single smartphone user in China has an Android phone that does not have Google services. And there are about 700 million smartphone users in China. So subtract that from 3 billion and you have about 2.3 billion people in the world, give or take, using Google services. That's a lot of people. Now, question for you. Would you use an Android phone without Google services? Because I sure would not. And Huawei has obviously been scrambling to create a new ecosystem with a robust app store. Otherwise, Huawei knows it, their smartphone division is dead outside of China. So Mr. Who's the Boss uploaded a video talking about Huawei's new operating system. It was sponsored by Huawei, and I'm not knocking Mr. Who's the Boss, but it just shows you how desperate Huawei is to let people know that they are not giving up even after losing Google services. So this whole Google thing is a huge problem for Huawei's phone division, but this next punch that President Trump and the USA is delivering could impact Huawei's other divisions and affect the future of smartphone communication. So what did the United States ban this time? Well, they took aim at HiSilicon, Huawei's chip manufacturer that manufactures SoCs, also known as the processor. It's literally the heart of the phone, and it's a much bigger problem than you might think. First of all, let's break down the details of the ban, because it's not that simple. They are blocking HiSilicon's access to two things. First, they are blocking access to American design software, and second, to manufacturing capabilities around the world. So let's first talk about software. I'm not sure if you are familiar with the term EDA. It stands for Electronic Design Automation, and it is vital software when developing any kind of chip, be it a desktop CPU, a smartphone processor, or even a graphics card or Internet of Things devices. If you don't quite understand, it's basically the SolidWorks and AutoCAD of the processor world. Now, the biggest providers of this software are Cadence and Synopsys. For example, AMD, Nvidia, and Qualcomm use Cadence as their software of choice, while Huawei, ARM, and Intel use Synopsys. Now, Huawei will be allowed to use the software they already purchased, but they cannot purchase any more software, and Synopsys will stop pushing updates to their software. While this might not affect Huawei right this second, it's going to be very, very hard for them to compete when other companies like Qualcomm, ARM, and Intel are allowed to get the updated software with new features, and Huawei is stuck on this old version of the software. Now, you might be thinking, no problem, just find another EDA to use that's not from America. However, all the biggest EDA companies, basically just Cadence and Synopsys, are all from the United States, which poses a huge problem. There are other non-American options out there. The biggest one that comes to mind is the Chinese Huada Empyrean software and the Japanese Zuken. But both these softwares cannot provide a complete design flow, which in layman's terms means the software cannot design a chip from start to finish. This is a serious handicap for Huawei as they try to compete in the already cutthroat processor space. And honestly, the future does not look good for HiSilicon at this point. The second block that America used is actually blocking Huawei from using the foundries, also known as factories. This will have a much more immediate impact on Huawei because if you don't even have a factory where you can produce the physical smartphone parts, you cannot produce a physical smartphone. However, Huawei has a 12-month stockpile of chips, so they basically have until, May of 2021, until they are, screwed. Again, you might ask, find another factory. Well, unfortunately, the ban includes TSMC, the world's largest chip maker based out of Taiwan. This company manufactures processors for Huawei, Apple, and Qualcomm, just to name a few. It also includes TWS, another huge chip maker based out of Taiwan, who makes smartphone radios. And finally, it also includes a biggie, Samsung out of Korea, who manufactures not only processors, but also RAM and storage for smartphones. They do have one option, and that is SMIC, a pretty big chip maker based out of Shanghai, who are probably the only supplier in China big enough to rival TSMC in Taiwan in terms of facilities. However, there is a big problem because SMIC, although they are big enough in terms of size to rival TSMC, they do not rival them in terms of technology. SMIC does not have the capability to produce 5nm or 7nm chips. They can do 14nm, but that's not good enough. They are going to fall behind. And to those of you who don't understand, in general, with processors, smaller is better. So 5nm is better than 7, which is better than 14. This means that Huawei cannot produce the very best like no one ever was. Oh, and don't forget, SMIC is a Chinese company, and America could hit them with additional sanctions as well, making it even harder for SMIC and Huawei to produce more stuff. So how will this affect Huawei? Well, really badly, obviously. Their smartphone business already sounds pretty messed up at this point, honestly. I mean, in order to get around the whole Google ban, Huawei had to re-release an older Huawei P30 Pro just so they could get a new phone out with Google services. And their newly released P40 Pro does not have Google services, but has obviously their own operating system and app store, but Huawei sales still have been down like a lot. And now with all this factory blocking done by America, can they even produce competitive high-end smartphones? Well, I guess we'll have to check in with Huawei again in 12 months when their stockpile runs out. The other division that will hit Huawei very hard is their networking business. Huawei is actually a huge player in providing network towers around the globe to provide consumers and companies with network access. One example is, for example, 4G network towers for wireless carriers like Verizon in America, Vodafone in Europe. So you, the consumer, can get some of that sweet LTE. They are also one of the market leaders in 5G technology, which is just recently coming out. They actually just installed a 5G tower on Mount Everest, and they actually have some people there who are going to permanently maintain that tower, which means that Mount Everest actually has better 5G connectivity than most people's houses, including mine. But this whole chip business is going to hit them really hard because network towers, as you might have guessed, rely heavily on microprocessors, and without access to any of these foundries, who know what might happen. Finally, this carrier networking business accounts for 34% of Huawei's revenue, while the consumer business accounts for about 54% of revenue. Add those together and you get 88% of Huawei's total revenue, which converted to dollars is about 100 billion US dollars. I mean, talk about hitting Huawei right where it hurts. Oh, and in other news, CFO of Huawei, Meng Wanzhou, is being extradited from Canada to America to face charges of doing business with Iran. Man, just when Huawei thought they hit rock bottom, and then they realized that rock bottom has a basement. Alright guys, thanks so much for watching, hope you liked it, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.